Hello, it's Data. A few viewers like yourself have requested an ASMR reading, so I thought I'd share a happy story for the holidays. Although not quite a holiday story, I wanted to read the original Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne, since I've only watched the show in the 90s. Some things may not be perfect, since I'm an amateur audiobook reader, but I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. So, let's snuggle up this season, drink hot cocoa, and listen together about the small adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Or, if you're in the far southern hemisphere like my friends in New Zealand and Aussieland, let's grab a cool one and relax. Chapter 1, in which we are introduced to Winnie the Pooh and some bees, and the stories begin. Here is Edward Bear coming downstairs now. Bump, bump, bump on the back of his head behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs, but sometimes he feels that there really is another way, if only he could stop bumping for a moment and think about it. And then he feels that perhaps there isn't. Anyhow, here he is at the bottom, and ready to be introduced to you, Winnie the Pooh. When I first heard his name, I said, just as you were going to say, but I thought he was a boy. So did I, said Christopher Robin. Then you can't call him Winnie? I don't. But you said, he's Winnie the Pooh. Don't you know what "there" means? Ah, yes, now I do, I said quickly, and I hope you do too, because it is all the explanation you are going to get. Sometimes Winnie the Pooh likes a game of some sort when he comes downstairs, and sometimes he likes to sit quietly in front of the fire and listen to a story. This evening... What about a story? Said Christopher Robin. What about a story? I said. Could you very sweetly tell Winnie the Pooh one? I suppose I could, I said. What sort of stories does he like? About himself, because he's that sort of bear. Oh, I see. So could you very sweetly? I'll try, I said. So I tried. Once upon a time, a very long time ago now, about last Friday, Winnie the Pooh lived in a forest all by himself under the name of Sanders. What does under the name mean? Asked Christopher Robin. It means he had the name over the door in gold letters and lived under it. Winnie the Pooh wasn't quite sure, said Christopher Robin. Now I am, said a growly voice. Then I will go on, said I. One day when he was out walking, he came to an open place in the middle of the forest, and in the middle of this place was a large oak tree, and, from the top of the tree, there came a loud buzzing noise. Winnie the Pooh sat down at the foot of the tree, put his head between his paws, and began to think. First of all, he said to himself, that buzzing noise means something. You don't get a buzzing noise like that, just buzzing and buzzing without it meaning something. If there's a buzzing noise, somebody's making a buzzing noise, and the only reason for making a buzzing noise that I know of is because you're a bee. Then he thought another long time, and said, and the only reason for being a bee that I know of is making honey. And then he got up and said, and the only reason for making honey is so as I can eat it. So he began to climb the tree. He climbed and he climbed and he climbed. And as he climbed, he sang a little song to himself. It went like this. Isn't it funny how a bear likes honey? Buzz, 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 I wonder why he does. Then he climbed a little further, and a little further, and just a little further. By that time, he had thought of another song. It's a very funny thought that, if bears were bees, they'd build their nests at the bottom of trees. And that being so, if the bees were bears, we shouldn't have to climb up all these stairs. He was getting rather tired by this time, so that is why he sang a complaining song. He was nearly there now, and if he just stood on that branch... Crack! Oh, help, said Pooh, as he dropped 10 feet on the branch below him. If only I hadn't, he said, as he bounced 20 feet on to the next branch. You see, what I meant to do, he explained, as he turned head over heels and crashed onto another branch 30 feet below. What I meant to do... Of course, it was rather, he admitted, as he slithered very quickly through the next 6 branches. It all comes, I suppose, he decided as he said goodbye to the last branch, spun round 3 times, and flew gracefully into a gorse bush. It all comes of liking honey so much. Oh, help. He crawled out of the gorse bush, brushed the prickles from his nose, and began to think again. And the first person he thought of was Christopher Robin. "Was that me?" said Christopher Robin in an awed voice, hardly daring to believe it. "That was you." Christopher Robin said nothing, but his eyes got larger and larger, and his face got pinker and pinker. So Winnie the Pooh went round to his friend Christopher Robin, who lived behind a green door in another part of the forest. "Good morning, Christopher Robin," he said. "Good morning, Winnie the Pooh," said you. "I wonder if you've got such a thing as a balloon about you." "A balloon?" "Yes," I just said to myself coming along. "I wonder if Christopher Robin has such a thing as a balloon about him." I just said it to myself, thinking of balloons and wondering. "What do you want a balloon for?" he said. Winnie the Pooh looked round to see that nobody was listening, put his paw to his mouth, and said in a deep whisper, "Honey." "But you don't get honey with balloons." "I do," said Pooh. "Well, it just happened that you had been to a party the day before at the house of your friend Piglet, and you had balloons at the party. You had a big green balloon, and one of Rabbit's relations had a big blue one, and had left it behind, being really too young to go to a party at all. And so you had brought the green one and the blue one home with you." "Which one would you like?" you asked Pooh. He put his head between his paws and thought very carefully. "It's like this," he said. "When you go after honey with a balloon, the great thing is not to let the bees know you're coming. Now, if you have a green balloon, they might think you were only part of the tree and not notice you, and if you had a blue balloon, they might think you were only part of the sky and not notice you, and the question is, which is most likely?" "Wouldn't they notice you underneath the balloon?" you asked. "They might, or they might not," said Winnie the Pooh. "You never can tell with bees." He thought for a moment and said, "I shall try to look like a small, dark cloud. That will deceive them." "Then you had better have the blue balloon," you said, and so it was decided. Well, you both went out with the blue balloon, and you took your gun with you just in case, as you always did, and Winnie the Pooh went to a very muddy place that he knew of, and rolled until he was dirty all over, and then, when the balloon was blown up as big, and you and Pooh were both holding onto the string, you let go suddenly, and Pooh Bear floated gracefully up into the sky, and stayed there, level with the top of the tree and about 20 feet away from it. "Hooray!" you shouted. "Isn't that fine?" shouted Winnie the Pooh down to you. "What do I look like?" "You look like a bear holding onto a balloon," you said. "Not," said Pooh anxiously. "Not like a small dark cloud in a blue sky?" "Not very much." "Ah, well, perhaps from up here it looks different, and, as I say, you never can tell with bees." There was no wind to blow him nearer to the tree, so there he stayed. He could see the honey, he could smell the honey, but he couldn't quite reach the honey. After a little while he called down to you. "Christopher Robin," he said in a loud whisper. "Hello." "I think the bees suspect something." "What sort of thing?" "I don't know, but something tells me that they're suspicious." "Perhaps they think that you're after their honey." "It may be that. You never can tell with bees." And there was another little silence, and then he called down to you again. "Christopher Robin." "Yes?" "Have you an umbrella in your house?" "I think so." "I wish you would bring it out here and walk up and down with it, and look up at me every now and then and say, 'Tut tut, looks like rain.' I think if you did that, it would help the deception which we are practicing on these bees." "Well," you laughed to yourself, "silly old bear," but you didn't say it aloud because you were so fond of him, and you went home for your umbrella. "Oh, there you are," called down Winnie the Pooh as soon as you got back to the tree. I was beginning to get anxious. I have discovered that the bees are now definitely suspicious. "Shall I put my umbrella up?" you said. "Yes, but wait a moment. We must be practical. The important bee to deceive is the queen bee. Can you see which is the queen bee from down there?" "No." "A pity. Well, now, if you walk up and down with your umbrella, saying, 'Tut tut, it looks like rain,' I shall do what I can by singing a little cloud song, such as a cloud might sing. Go." While you walked up and down and wondered if it would rain, Winnie the Pooh sang this song. How sweet to be a cloud floating in the blue. Every little cloud always sings aloud. How sweet to be a cloud floating in the blue. It makes them very proud to be a little cloud. The bees were still buzzing as suspiciously as ever. Some of them, indeed, left their nests and flew all around the cloud as it began the second verse of the song. And one bee sat down on the nose of the cloud for a moment, and then got up again. Christopher— Ow! Robin, called out the cloud. Yes? I have just been thinking, and I have come to a very important decision. These are the wrong sort of bees. Are they? Quite the wrong sort. Quite the wrong sort. So I should think they would make the wrong sort of honey, shouldn't you? Would they? Yes, so I think I shall come down. How? Asked you. Winnie the Pooh hadn't thought about this. If he let go of the string, he would fall. Bump. And he didn't like the idea of that. So he thought for a long time, and then he said, Christopher Robin, you must shoot the balloon with your gun. Have you got your gun? Of course I have, you said. But if I do that, it will spoil the balloon, you said. But if you don't, said Pooh, I shall have to let go, and that would spoil me. When you put it like this, you saw how it was, and you aimed very carefully at the balloon, and fired. Ow, said Pooh. Did I miss, you asked? You didn't exactly miss, said Pooh, but you missed the balloon. I'm so sorry, he said, and he fired again, and this time he hit the balloon, and the air came slowly out, and Winnie the Pooh floated down to the ground. But his arms were so stiff from holding on to the string of the balloon all that time that they stayed up straight in the air for more than a week, and whenever a fly came and settled on his nose, he had to blow it off. And I think, but I am not sure, that is why he was always called Pooh. Is that the end of the story? Asked Christopher Robin. That's the end of that one, and there are others. About Pooh and me, and Piglet, and Rabbit, and all of you. Don't you remember? I do remember, and then, when I try to remember, I forget. That day when Pooh and Piglet tried to catch the heffalump, they didn't catch it, did they? No. Pooh couldn't, because he hadn't any brain. Did I catch it? Well, that comes into the story. Christopher Robin nodded. I do remember, he said. I do remember, he said. Only Pooh doesn't very well, so that's why he liked having it told to him again. Because then, it's a real story, and not just a remembering. That's just how I feel, I said. Christopher Robin gave a deep sigh, picked his bear up by the leg, and walked off to the door, trailing Pooh behind him. At the door he turned and said, Coming to see me have my bath? I might, I said. It didn't hurt him when I shot him, did I? Not a bit. He nodded and went out, and in a moment I heard Winnie the Pooh bump, 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 going up the stairs behind him. Chapter 2, in which Pooh goes visiting and gets into a tight place. Edward Bear, known to his friends as Winnie the Pooh, or Pooh for short, was walking through the forest one day, humming proudly to himself. He had made up a little hum that very morning as he was doing his stoutness exercises in front of the glass. Tra-la-la, tra-la-la, as he stretched up as high as he could go, and then tra-la-la, tra-la, oh, help, la, as he tried to reach his toes. After breakfast, he had said it over and over to himself until he had learnt it off by heart, and now he was humming it right through properly. It went like this. Tra-la-la, 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 rum-tum, tiddle-lum-tum, tiddle-liddle, 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 rum-tum, rum-tum-tum, tiddle-lum. Well, he was humming this hum to himself, and walking along gaily, wondering what everybody else was doing, and what it felt like, being somebody else, when suddenly he came to a sandy bank, and in the bank was a large hole. Aha, said Pooh. Rum-tum-tiddle-lum-tum. If I know anything about anything, that hole means rabbit, he said, and rabbit means company, he said, and company means food and listening to me humming and such like. Rum-tum-tum-tiddle-lum. He bent down, put his head into the hole, and called out, "Is anybody at home?" There was a sudden scuffling noise from inside the hole, and then silence. "What I said was, 'Is anybody at home?'" called out Pooh very loudly. "No," said a voice, and then added, "You didn't shout so loud. I heard you quite well the first time." "Bother," said Pooh. "Isn't there anybody here at all?" "Nobody." Winnie the Pooh took his head out of the hole and thought for a little, and he thought to himself, "There must be somebody there, because somebody must have said nobody." So he put his head back in the hole and said, "Hello, Rabbit. Isn't that you?" "No," said Rabbit, in a different sort of voice this time. "But isn't that Rabbit's voice?" "I don't think so," said Rabbit. "It isn't meant to be." "Oh," said Pooh. He took his head out of the hole and had another think, and then he put it back and said, "Well, could you very kindly tell me where Rabbit is?" "He has gone to see his friend Pooh Bear, who is a great friend of his." "But this is me," said Bear, very much surprised. "What sort of me?" "Pooh Bear." "Are you sure?" said the Rabbit, still more surprised. Quite sure," said Pooh. "Oh well, then come in." So Pooh pushed and pushed and pushed his way through the hole, and at last he got in. "You were quite right," said Rabbit, looking at him all over. "It is you. Glad to see you." "Who did you think it was?" "Well, I wasn't sure. You know how it is in the forest. One can't have anybody coming into one's house. One has to be careful." "What about a mouthful of something?" Pooh always liked a little something at 11 o'clock in the morning, and he was very glad to see Rabbit getting out the plates and mugs, and when Rabbit said, "Honey or condensed milk with your bread?" he was so excited that he said both. And then, so as not to seem greedy, he added, "But don't bother about the bread, please." And for a long time after that he said nothing, until at last, humming to himself in a rather sticky voice, he got up, shook Rabbit lovingly by the paw, and said that he must be going on. "Must you?" said Rabbit politely. "Well," said Pooh, "I could stay a little longer if you—" and he tried very hard to look in the direction of the larder. "As a matter of fact," said Rabbit, "I was going out myself directly." "Oh, well, then I'll be going on. Goodbye." "Well, goodbye, if you're sure you won't have any more." "Is there any more?" asked Pooh quickly. Rabbit took the covers off the dishes and said, "No, there wasn't." "I thought not," said Pooh, nodding to himself. "Well, goodbye. I must be going on." He started to climb out of the hole. He pulled with his front paws and pushed with his back paws, and in a little while his nose was out in the open again, and then his ears, and then his front paws, and then his shoulders, and then— "Oh, help," said Pooh. "I'd better go back." "Oh, bother," said Pooh. "I shall have to go on." "I can't do either," said Pooh. "Oh, help and bother." Now by this time Rabbit wanted to go for a walk too, and finding the front door full, he went out by the back door and came round to Pooh and looked at him. "Hello, are you stuck?" he asked. No," said Pooh carelessly, "just resting and thinking and humming to myself." "Here, give us a paw." Pooh Bear stretched out a paw, and Rabbit pulled and pulled and pulled. "Ow!" cried Pooh. "You're hurting." "The fact is," said Rabbit, "you're stuck." "It all comes," said Pooh crossly, "of not having front doors big enough." "It all comes," said Rabbit sternly, "of eating too much." "I thought at the time," said Rabbit, "only I didn't like to say anything," said Rabbit. "That one of us was eating too much," said Rabbit, "and I knew it wasn't me," he said. Well, I shall go and fetch Christopher Robin." Christopher Robin lived at the other end of the forest, and when he came back with Rabbit and saw the front half of Pooh, he said, "Silly old bear," in such a loving voice that everybody felt quite hopeful again. "I was just beginning to think," said Bear, sniffing lightly, "that Rabbit might never be able to use his front door again, and I should hate that," he said. "So should I," said Rabbit. "Use his front door again," said Christopher Robin. "Of course he'll use his front door again." "Good," said Rabbit. "If we can't pull you out, Pooh, we might push you back." Rabbit scratched his whiskers thoughtfully and pointed out that when Pooh was pushed back, he was back, and of course nobody was more glad to see Pooh than he was. Still, there it was. Some lived in trees and some lived on the ground, and... "You mean I'd never get out?" said Pooh. "I mean," said Rabbit, "that having got so far, it seems a pity to waste it." Christopher Robin nodded. "Then there's only one thing to be done," he said. "We shall have to wait for you to get thin again." "How long does getting thin take?" asked Pooh anxiously. "About a week, I should think. But I can't stay here for a week." "You can stay here all right, silly old bear. It's getting you out which is so difficult." "We'll read to you," said Rabbit cheerfully, "and I hope it won't snow," he added. "And I say, old fellow, you're taking up a good deal of room in my house. Do you mind if I use your back legs as a towel horse? Because, I mean, there they are, doing nothing. It would be very convenient just to hang the towels on them." "A week," said Pooh gloomily. "What about meals?" "I'm afraid no meals," said Christopher Robin, "because of getting thin quicker, but we will read to you." Bear began to sigh, and then found he couldn't because he was so tightly stuck, and a tear rolled down his eye, as he said, "Then would you read a sustaining book, such as would help and comfort a wedged bear in great tightness?" But for a week Christopher Robin read that sort of book at the north end of Pooh, and Rabbit hung his washing on the south end. And in between, Bear felt himself getting slenderer and slenderer, and at the end of the week, Christopher Robin said, "Now!" So he took hold of Pooh's front paws, and Rabbit took hold of Christopher Robin, and all Rabbit's friends and relations took hold of Rabbit, and they all pulled together. And for a long time, Pooh only said, "Ow!" and "Oh!" And then, all of a sudden, he said, "Pop!" just as if a cork were coming out of a bottle. And Christopher Robin and Rabbit and all Rabbit's friends and relations went head over heels backwards, and on the top of them came Winnie the Pooh, free. So, with a nod of thanks to his friends, he went on with his walk through the forest, humming proudly to himself. But Christopher Robin looked after him lovingly and said to himself, "Silly old bear." Chapter 3, in which Pooh and Piglet go hunting and nearly catch a woozle. The Piglet lived in a very grand house in the middle of a beech tree, and the beech tree was in the middle of the forest, and the Piglet lived in the middle of the house. Next to his house was a piece of broken board which had "Trespassers W" on it. When Christopher Robin asked the Piglet what it meant, he said it was his grandfather's name, and had been in the family for a long time. Christopher Robin said you couldn't be called Trespassers W, and Piglet said yes, you could, because his grandfather was, and it was short for Trespassers Will, which was short for Trespassers William. And his grandfather had had two names in case he lost one, Trespassers after an uncle, and William after Trespassers. "I've got two names," said Christopher Robin carelessly. "Well, there you are, that proves it," said Piglet. One fine winter's day, when Piglet was brushing away the snow in front of his house, he happened to look up, and there was Winnie the Pooh. Pooh was walking round and round in a circle, thinking of something else, and when Piglet called to him, he just went on walking. "Hello," said Piglet. "What are you doing?" "Hunting," said Pooh. "Hunting what?" "Tracking something," said Winnie the Pooh very mysteriously. "Tracking what?" said Piglet, coming closer. "That's just what I asked myself. I asked myself, what?" "What do you think he'll answer?" "I shall have to wait until I catch up with it," said Winnie the Pooh. "Now look there." He pointed to the ground in front of him. "What do you see there?" "Tracks," said Piglet. "Paw marks." He gave a little squeak of excitement. "Oh, Pooh, do you think it's a woozle?" "It may be," said Pooh. "Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. You can never tell with paw marks." With these few words he went on tracking, and Piglet, after watching him for a minute or two, ran after him. Winnie the Pooh had come to a sudden stop, and was bending over the tracks in a puzzled sort of way. "What's the matter?" asked Piglet. "It's a very funny thing," said Bear, "but there seems to be two animals now. This, whatever it was, has been joined by another, whatever it is, and the two of them are now proceeding in company. Would you mind coming with me, Piglet, in case they turn out to be hostile animals?" Piglet scratched his ear in a nice sort of way. and said that he had nothing to do until Friday, and would be delighted to come in case it really was a woozle. You mean, in case it really is two woozles, said Winnie the Pooh, and Piglet said that anyhow he had nothing to do until Friday, so off they went together. There was a small spinney of large trees just here, and it seemed as if the two woozles, if that is what they were, had been going round this spinney, so round this spinney went Pooh and Piglet after them, Piglet passing the time by telling Pooh what his grandfather Trespasser's W had done to remove stiffness after tracking, and how his grandfather Trespasser's W had suffered in his later years from shortness of breath, and other matters of interest, and Pooh wondering what a grandfather was like, and if perhaps this was two grandfathers they were after now, and, if so, whether he would be allowed to take one home and keep it, and what Christopher Robin would say. And still the tracks went on in front of them. Suddenly, Winnie the Pooh stopped, and pointed excitedly in front of him. "Look!" "What?" said Piglet, with a jump. And then to show that he hadn't been frightened, he jumped up and down once or twice more in an exercising sort of way. "The tracks," said Pooh. "A third animal has joined the other two." "Pooh!" cried Piglet. "Do you think it is another woozle?" "No," said Pooh, "because it makes different marks. It is either two woozles and one, as it might be whizzle, or two, as it might be whizzles and one, if so it is woozle. Let us continue to follow them." So they went on, feeling just a little anxious now, in case the three animals in front of them were of hostile intent, and Piglet watched very much that his grandfather T.W. were there, instead of elsewhere. And Pooh thought how nice it would be if they met Christopher Robin suddenly, but quite accidentally, and only because he liked Christopher Robin so much. And then, all of a sudden, Winnie the Pooh stopped again, and licked the tip of his nose in a cooling manner, for he was feeling more hot and anxious than ever in his life before. There were 4 animals in front of them. "Do you see, Piglet? Look at their tracks. 3, as it were, woozles, and 1, as it was, whizzle. Another woozle has joined them." And so it seemed to be. There were the tracks, covering over each other here, getting muddled up with each other there, but, quite plainly, every now and then, the tracks of 4 sets of paws. "I think," said Piglet, when he had licked the tip of his nose too, and found that it brought very little comfort, "I think that I have just remembered something. I've just remembered something that I forgot to do yesterday and shan't be able to do tomorrow, so I suppose I really ought to go back and do it now." "We'll do it this afternoon, and I'll come with you," said Pooh. "Isn't the sort of thing you can do in the afternoon," said Piglet quickly. "It's a very particular morning thing that has to be done in the morning, and if possible between the hours of— what would you say the time was?" "About 12, said Winnie the Pooh, looking at the sun. "Between, as I was saying, the hours of 12 and 12:05, so really, dear old Pooh, if you would excuse me— what's that?" Pooh looked up at the sky, and then, as he heard the whistle again, he looked up into the branches of a big oak tree, and then he saw a friend of his. "It's Christopher Robin," he said. "Ah, then you'll be all right," said Piglet. "You'll be quite safe with him. Goodbye." And he trotted off home as quickly as he could, very glad to be out of all danger again. Christopher Robin came slowly down this tree. "Silly old bear," he said. "What were you doing? First you went round the spinney twice by yourself, and then Piglet ran after you, and you went round again together, and then you were just going round a 4th time." "Wait a moment," said Winnie the Pooh, holding up his paw. He sat down and thought in the most thoughtful way he could think. Then he fitted his paw into one of the tracks, and then he scratched his nose twice, and stood up. "Yes," said Winnie the Pooh. "I see now," said Winnie the Pooh. "I have been foolish and deluded," said he, "and I am a bearer of no brain at all." "You're the best bear in all the world," said Christopher Robin soothingly. "Am I?" said Pooh hopefully. And then he brightened up suddenly. "Anyhow," he said, "it is nearly luncheon time." So he went home for it. So, what did you think of my reading of Winnie the Pooh? Did it help you relax or fall asleep? Comment below on any feedback or criticism, as it's my first public reading that's not a daycare. If you would like me to continue this ASMR series, please consider signing up for my membership by clicking the join button below. It's only $8, which is worth an inexpensive restaurant meal that'll motivate me to continue providing new videos like this. Until next time, I hope you have a good holiday season. Take care.